You've had one of those days where every decision feels wrong, your thoughts spiral, and paranoia whispers just beneath your mind's surface. But what if I told you that this exhaustion isn't accidental? That darkness is weaponized in the form of sleep deprivation as a covert tactic to break down your mental defenses and control your behavior. If you've been watching this series, you know that emotional flooding and cognitive bias aren't just coincidences. This is manipulation at its deepest level. Sleep deprivation manipulation is a dark psychological tactic where the intentional denial or disruption of restful sleep is used to weaken a person's mental, emotional, and cognitive defenses. This isn't just about being tired. It's a strategic assault on the brain's capacity to process, reason, and emotionally regulate, making even strong-willed individuals far easier to influence and control. If you've followed this series, you already understand the power emotional flooding and cognitive bias exploitation have in muddying judgment. Sleep deprivation amplifies these vulnerabilities drastically. When the brain is exhausted, the prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for decision-making, impulse control, and assessing threats, doesn't function optimally. So, people become more reactive, less rational, and painfully susceptible to suggestion. This is why manipulators use this as a covert tool in abusive relationships, military interrogations, cult indoctrination, and even modern workplace environments. The damage isn't always visible, but the psychological fallout can be devastating. Impaired judgment, increased paranoia, emotional instability, and long-term cognitive decline. Sleep deprivation manipulation doesn't require overt violence or obvious coercion. It works beneath the surface, systematically dismantling resistance. Recognizing it is crucial because it's an invisible form of psychological warfare that often goes unrecognized. Yet it's one of the most effective ways to seize control over a mind and disrupt autonomy. Here's the thing, to truly understand why sleep deprivation manipulation is so powerful, we need to look at what sleep does to the brain. Scientists have shown that sleep is vital for brain recovery, memory consolidation, emotional regulation, and clearing metabolic waste. When sleep is disrupted or denied, several key brain functions break down. The prefrontal cortex, the CEO of your brain responsible for rational thought, self-control, and decision-making, loses efficiency. This results in poor judgment, impulsivity, and difficulty evaluating risks. Simultaneously, the amygdala, the brain's emotional center, becomes hyperactive, heightening fear, anxiety, and emotional reactivity. So, sleep deprivation creates a brain in chaos. Cognitive skills plummet while emotional storms surge unchecked. What this means for the victim of manipulation is clear. Instead of thinking clearly or resisting emotional coercion, the brain is more likely to snap, freeze, or comply. Memory distortions also become common, undermining a person's confidence in their perception of reality. These neurological vulnerabilities are exactly what manipulators exploit. By disrupting sleep, whether through environmental tactics, pressure, or stress induction, they create a predictable, weakened mental state that's lethally fertile ground for suggestion and control. This neuroscience explains why sleep deprivation isn't a fringe torture technique but a fundamental tool of psychological manipulation that has been studied, replicated, and weaponized. But here's where it gets disturbing. One of the most infamous documented uses of sleep deprivation manipulation comes from the CIA's MKUltra program during the Cold War. Reports reveal that prisoners were deprived of sleep for days or weeks to produce psychological breakdown, false confessions, and submission. The same technique appeared in military interrogations during conflicts around the world, designed to erode resistance without physical brutality. Cults have similarly wielded sleep deprivation, combined with isolation and emotional pressure, to dismantle followers' identities and forge obedience. In every case, the results were harrowing. Mental disorientation, hallucinations, increased suggestibility, and profound emotional volatility. These are not isolated tactics but a pattern repeated since the mid-20th century and beyond. The psychological autopsy of such situations shows a clear causal link between sleep deprivation and collapse of individual autonomy. Victims are left vulnerable not just physically, but with shattered cognitive clarity and emotional stability. This deep-level control leaves behind long-lasting psychological scars, sometimes indistinguishable from severe trauma or psychiatric disorders. Recognizing these historical contexts is critical. The dark psychology of sleep deprivation is not a relic but a continuing abuse tactic, repurposed today in subtler, more insidious forms. Now here's what nobody tells you. What's terrifying is how sleep deprivation manipulation isn't confined to secret programs or hostile interrogation rooms anymore. It's everywhere, often hidden in plain sight. Consider the modern workplace. Relentless deadlines, on-call demands, and glorified burnout culture systematically rob employees of rest. This chronic exhaustion diminishes workers' ability to question authority, spot unfair treatment, or resist toxic cultures. Social media algorithms are another vector. By flooding your brain late at night with endless notifications and emotionally charged content, they hijack your neural pathways when you're too tired to think critically. Political disinformation campaigns exploit this too, targeting fatigued voters who are more prone to emotional appeals and less able to fact-check. Even advertising counts on tired minds making impulsive purchases without resistance. The subtlety here is what makes it so dangerous. Unlike obvious coercion, no one is directly attacking your brain. Instead, systems and structures erode your cognitive defenses slowly and persistently. The result? A society primed for manipulation, where exhaustion is weaponized as social control. If you feel you're making poor decisions or easily overwhelmed without clear cause, this invisible sleep deprivation manipulation may be silently at work in your life. And this is where the story takes a dark turn. The good news is that, like most dark psychological manipulations, there are ways to defend yourself from sleep deprivation manipulation. First, awareness is the foundation. Knowing sleep deprivation can be weaponized makes it easier to identify toxic environments or relationships. Prioritize sleep hygiene. They're not just rituals, they're barriers against cognitive vulnerability. Establish boundaries around work and screen time, especially before bed. If you suspect someone uses exhaustion to manipulate you, communicate your need for rest clearly and enforce it. Mental restoration techniques, like mindfulness, grounding exercises, and deliberate breaks, can help rebuild cognitive resilience when full sleep isn't immediately possible. On a systemic level, advocating for fair workplace practices, digital well-being, and public health literacy helps dismantle environments that enable this abuse. Importantly, don't dismiss feelings of impaired judgment or emotional overload. These signals are your brain begging for restoration. Protecting your sleep cycles is protecting your autonomy. Resistance starts with simple actions: unplugging, resting, and recognizing when your tiredness isn't just fatigue but a setup for manipulation. Self-care becomes a radical act of defiance against dark psychological control. Sleep deprivation manipulation is a hidden weapon that disables your brain's natural defenses by attacking your capacity to think, regulate emotions, and resist influence. To protect yourself, prioritize restorative sleep as non-negotiable. Maintain strong personal boundaries around rest, and develop awareness that exhaustion can be exploited intentionally. If you notice impaired judgment, heightened emotional reactivity, or mental fog, pause and reclaim your control through deep rest and mindfulness. Systemically, resist cultures that glorify burnout and advocate for environments that safeguard cognitive health. Recognizing and resisting this subtle but devastating tactic restores clarity and autonomy, making you far less susceptible to manipulation, because a well-rested mind is a fortress no manipulator can easily breach. What you've just uncovered is only the tip of the iceberg. Next, we're peeling back the layers on how chronic mental exhaustion beyond sleep interacts with manipulation tactics to trap the mind even deeper. If this video shook you, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the chilling truths still ahead. Your mind's freedom depends on it.